you guys. Well, there we go. All right. So my name is Esther Balkin. I'm a senior research engineer at Ohio State University, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what I do and what that means. But I wanted to start off with kind of the origins of this talk and why I thought this was worth your time and worth all of us getting together and talk about this. So because I work at a university, my time is spent split pretty much three ways. The first thing is doing research, the second is teaching, and the third is working with organizations like yours, trying to understand why safety accidents happen, how organizations work, what complexity is involved, how people manage trade-offs, all of these difficult kinds of choices and issues. And about 2.5 years ago, an individual I've known quite a while, works at a large electric utility, came to me and said, you know, I'd like to hire somebody, and I think one of your students might be a good fit. And I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit about the position. You know, we have graduate students all the time coming out, undergraduates. Tell me about what you're looking for, and I'll see if I can find somebody for you. And he said to me, well, I want somebody who really has a deep understanding of how complex systems operate. But I also want them to have a strong background in human factors engineering. I want them to know all about the history and the development of high reliability organizations and organizing, what our problems are, and to be able to recognize them. I want them to be able to lead learning teams. I want them to be able to collect that information and do that data analysis and share that information across the organization. And I said, well, all right, let's slow down. First of all, that's a team of people. This is not one person's job. How many of the people in this room do more than one person's job? Right? All right. Okay. So that got me thinking, well, maybe this individual just doesn't understand what he's asking for, right? I want someone who's human factors person. I want a systems engineer, but I also want someone who does learning teams. And I also want someone who does HRO. And I also want someone to be a HOP coach and a human performance advisor. And it really got me thinking, you know, when we all got started thinking this way and trying to spread these kinds of ideas, we were so excited to get our foot in the door and talk about this kind of stuff to anyone that would listen. We didn't really care what they called it. Oh, you want a program, Safety 2, you read about Safety 2? We can do Safety 2. HOP is what you're into? We can do HOP, right? You read a book on HROs on aircraft carriers? Yeah, we can run your company just like that, right? We were so eager to get these ideas out and talk to them and spread them to anyone who would listen. We thought to ourselves, well, at least I thought to myself, if I'm going to get 30 minutes with a director or a vice president, I'm not going to have a semantic discussion with them, right? I'm not going to have a talk about the difference between these things. And that was my strong policy, my explicit policy for a long time. Through this conversation with my friend, I realized that might not have been the right way. Because what we did is we kind of created this weird soup where all of these ideas kind of get thrown into a bucket and mixed up, and we don't really know what they are anymore. I was going through this talk with a buddy of mine over drinks about a week ago, and I said to him, you know, I put together this beautiful presentation. It's about the history of all of these different movements and where these ideas come from and where they're going and how they interact and when you use one and when you use the other one. And yeah, I had this chart of, this one can work with this one, but not in this and these situations. And I could see his eyes glazing over as I was discussing this. And I said, you know, I'm talking on the first morning of the first full day of the conference. This is not going to work. I need to be engaging. I need to be excited. I need to lift these people up. And he looked at me with a very straight face and he said, well, you need to be engaging. Being the most entertaining speaker at a safety conference is a lot like being the liveliest corpse in a morgue. And I thought to myself, that is terribly insulting. So he agreed to buy the next round of drinks, And I agreed not to call the FAA and put him on the no-fly list. And I sat down and reworked this talk. And that brings me to where we are and where I am. I am a senior research engineer in the Cognitive Systems Engineering Lab. This is the country's oldest research laboratory that studies the intersection between people, technology, and work. So how do we use the tools we use to do the jobs we need to do, and how do we build organizations that support that? Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. There are things to learn either way. So I'm going to talk you through my new and revised and more engaging discussion of this. We're going to talk about members of the family tree. We're going to talk about all of these different ideas. HRO, HOP, human factors in ergonomics, human factors engineering, human performance, safety 2, new view, resilience engineering. But we're not going to talk about all of them. We're going to hit on all of those. And we're particularly going to talk about the ideas that run between them. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how it is that the movements that started in safety really got lost. The truth of the matter is, as a researcher, I get the wonderful opportunity to work with all kinds of organizations. Safety organizations, software organizations, financial organizations. And when I look back at the last 15 years or so, safety isn't leading the way in these new ideas anymore in the way that it used to. All right? We're going to talk about why that is and where we can look for inspiration. As I mentioned, my concern, at least the topic of this talk, is that we become a soup. We just have a bunch of ideas. They kind of go together. We can make them go together. We can at least make them go together well enough to sell it to our boss and maybe our boss's boss. But we don't really know how they connect. We don't really know when we can use one, when we can use the other. And so I am about to deliver unto you, in the next 30 seconds, the worst safety metaphor ever created. And so I say, out with the soup, let's talk charcuterie. Now, admittedly, a horrifically bad metaphor, but to be fair, 5 drinks in with my buddy, and by the way, he's an accountant, so it's not like his life is so interesting either, right? Okay, so here we are, 5 drinks in. This is literally the best metaphor we could come up with for disambiguating this soup scenario. Some of the things on the charcuterie board go together. Most of them, in fact, do. Most of them can be mixed to your heart's content. And then occasionally you dip a date in mustard and you wish your life was over, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about how we find ourselves in that same position in these kinds of movements. We're going to start with HRO. I start with HRO, and we give the most actual screen time to HRO, because HRO was really the first of these movements coalesce in a way that had 2 important characteristics. It had both a scientific theoretical backing, and it also had specific practical objectives, things that the science says you can do to help your organization achieve its goals. This, as you can see from the timeline, I'm not going to go through this in detail, late 70s to early 80s. What can really get the headline here? But the truth is there were actually several groups of folks who came before them who really laid the groundwork, including the Berkeley HRO project. And they don't get anywhere near as much credit as they really should, because they did incredible research on aircraft carriers and things like that. If you haven't read the book Normal Accidents, please do. Since Todd's not here, I can tell you, if you can only read one safety or human performance book this year, read Normal Accidents, right? It's an incredible text, and it's the first time that the idea of the normality of changing work, that the acceptance of variability really was expressed so clearly. It was the first real deviation and change in management and safety in well over 100 years. In particular, if you take nothing else away from my time with you today, realize that from this text was the foundations of the idea that there might not be a single root cause with a single person who you can point to and retrain or fire and make everything all better. It was this idea that these small, he uses the term accretion, I would say aggregation, right? That these small little choices, these small actions combine, interact in unusual ways, unpredictable ways to create major events. By the 90s, we had spread HRO into aviation, formed the basis of crew resource management in the military and in aviation. It would spread to the naval world as well, and eventually into healthcare. And if there are any healthcare folks in the room, we can talk later about how it was that healthcare, HRO got started with such a strong push in healthcare and then seems to have fizzled out. It's a truly depressing story. But here we go, HRO, we're off to the races. How many people in this room, how many people in this room, if I said, what's the difference? If I was gonna bring in a consultant, if I was gonna hire a new person, would I want someone who's an expert in HRO or in HOP? How many people could split that? One, is stretching or one guy? All right, one guy, right? One person out of the room. That's what this talk is about. Right. We have these ideas and we don't know how they connect. What makes an HRO? These are the characteristics that research has shown contribute to this idea of highly reliable organizations, highly reliable organizing. It became sort of verbized, right, in that way. And so when you're talking about highly reliable organizations, you're looking for ones that represent, that have these particular components. I want to draw your attention to something. Multiple necessary outcomes. Every job site I go onto, even at the university, every workshop I go into has a sign that says, anybody want to guess? Safety first. God, that's bullshit. Right? Do we ever do more to lie to each other than put up a safety first sign? There should be a fine for that, right? There really should be. Because the truth of the matter is that sign should really read multiple, often competing goals, juggled and reassessed dynamically over time. The problem is you cannot put that on a bumper sticker. I tried, it's very expensive. So we're stuck with safety first, even though we know that organizations that are successful over the long term, doing really hard, really risky work, recognize explicitly that we can't have a single measure of success and safety can't always be first. Safety is one of a number of things we're juggling, and we have to keep juggling. Stopping juggling is not an option, so all we can do is really get better at it. The other thing I would point out, and for those of you who will read, look into this, is the high degree of accountability, right? How many of you have heard or have read the books called like Extreme Ownership? It's a military, written by a Navy SEAL, right? It's become very popular. It had its period of being the #1 most common management book, right? The problem is that the kinds of principles that often work well at the small group level, and we're going to talk about the difference, that often work well at a small group level and a cohesive team, when they grow and are applied at a larger organization, they become a stick you can beat the crap out of people with. And they just don't work at that scale, and we haven't figured out a good way to do that. All right, so HRO. The next thing is HOP. I like HOP. I like HOP a lot. My problem isn't the idea so much as what we call it. I like my H a little bit far away from my OP, right? I like my peas and my carrots, and there should be no mixing between the peas and the carrots. That was an old movie reference. 2 people laughed. I guess the movie's not so. Thank you. I got one more. I'll take it. Right? It's not that human organizational performance shouldn't go. It shouldn't be said in a single breath. Because the truth is, they're different. The things that we do to understand how human beings can potential are very different from the things we do to engineer systems. H and OP don't need a divorce, but they definitely need some time apart. The question of human performance really draws from anatomy and physiology, issues after World War II. These are the kinds of questions that human performance addresses. If you're looking for a person to be a human performance expert, you should look for someone with a background in psychology, with a background in physiology, someone who studies team situational awareness, someone who understands the effects of exhaustion on people over time and how work hour restrictions can support that, or in some cases actually hinder that, right? Someone who recognizes that people will perceive risk differently, but over large scale studies, there are patterns in the way people perceive risk, and we can work with that. Right? It's not random. If you're looking for a human performance person, this is the kind of person you're looking for. And that's different from the op person. The op person is going to help you understand trade-offs. The ops person is going to help you set policy, is going to create the atmosphere that allows people to come forward when they see something, is going to help you understand how learning teams can influence your larger organization, even if you can't necessarily figure a way to get that knowledge out of there. These are people who have training in industrial engineering, psychology, business management, right? When we looked at HROs at the very beginning, you'll notice up here, when the original HRO work was presented, it was presented in disaster management and in business administration journals. That's who the expected audience was. It was expected that people who dealt with the consequences of failure or people who were designing and running organizations, those were the ones who are actually going to need this kind of information. By the way, he and I are running a 10 by 200 relay later on. We're just practicing for later. I'm the first leg, in case you were wondering, so, you know, I don't have to be the fastest, I just have to be stable. That's what they tell you. All right. So, when you're looking for an organizational performance, you are looking for someone who is going to help you integrate the components. You are looking for someone who's going to build the system that lets the components achieve their potential to get the best result for the larger system. That's in contrast to the human performance. The direct human performance side doesn't say, how do we support the system? It says, how do we support the individual, the small team, in their quest to meet their potential? Right? The target is different. Some of the policies are going to be the same, and that's why they can work together. The policies that you can generate that will support both team and system performance are the most likely to have a profound effect, but they aren't the only ones you're going to need. Resilience engineering. Oh, actually, we'll do this one. Safety 2, new view of safety. There's going to be fewer people familiar with this, but how many people are familiar with safety 2 or new view safety? Right? All right, pretty good. So, later, right? So this is basically Woods and Hallnagel, later Sidney Decker, later still Todd. This really emerged directly from the HRO movement, heavily influenced from the HRO movement. Really, the significant contribution here is the separation between quality and safety. How many folks work in departments that are both quality and safety departments? Just a few. Okay. Statistically, it's far more common. Statistically, it's somewhere between 30 and 40%. Departments are total quality and safety, right? Organizational excellence, all of these kinds of things. Here, you're looking for ideas like learning from normal work. Right? We've all seen that Holnagel pie chart, where these are all the accidents that happen in this tiny little narrow wedge, or this is all the work that's done in this tiny little narrow wedge. Those are the ones that result in accidents, and as a result, those are the ones we look at. Right? This is also where we get the work is imagined, work is done. Right? That will later be included as Black Line, Blue Line by Todd Conklin. Right? This is the origin of that. If you're looking for someone who is a safety 2 practitioner, you're looking for someone who has applied HRO principles to the safety and quality world. That's what you're looking for. Finally, the latest entrant is resilience engineering, and this is pretty squarely where most of my research comes from. Early 2000s, again, you're talking about Holnagel and David Woods and some others, a fascination with how systems fail. How and why systems fail. What goes wrong? Are there patterns in what goes wrong? Can we look at this? This is where we're starting to talk about, well, what does it mean to really be proactive, right? How do you build and manage capacity to be proactive? If you're looking for a resilience engineering practitioner, you're looking for someone who is obsessed with failure, who is obsessed with surprise, someone who recognizes that the root of every significant quality or safety failure, there is a surprise, and I am going to bloodhound that until I find that surprise. I'm going to sniff it out, and I'm going to tell you how we need to change things to prevent that surprise. I like to say that folks in this field elevate the love of complexity to an art form. They really revel in how all these things are connected and interconnected. So, I said these are members of the family tree. These are all connected. In some sense, they all come from HRO. In some sense, they all come from a changing view. But what often unites them, or at least what people talk about, is the focus on learning, because all of these have a strong focus on learning. If you can do a resilience engineering style learning team, you can do a safety 2 learning team. A learning team is a technique, it's a method, right? It's a form of knowledge elicitation, right? You can do that for almost anything. There are certainly ways to do an RCA style learning team. You'd have to kind of work some pretzel situations, but you could make it happen, right? But it's not about the learning. What makes all of these processes members of the same family is that they appreciate the complexity of the work systems. They reject the simplifications that you read in management textbooks and handbooks. They reject this idea that things can be broken down. They reject the idea that everything is the same. They explicitly reject the ideas of linearity. I put up a little chart here. I hope this is helpful. On the left, I put some of the traditional myths that you would see. These are the kinds of things that you have likely been told, or they are the logic that underpins your policies. Even if you don't say them explicitly, this is the logic that underpins your policies. And on the right, I've presented what I'm calling the systems and complexity informed truth. What does the research actually tell us about safety 2, about HROs, about HOP? They're members of the family tree because they accept that these systems are complex. They accept that they're nonlinear. They accept that behaviors are emergent rather than directional, right? Our work system is mostly stable. In reality, people are adapting to change with fluency. And if it looks stable to you, it's because you've hired good people and they're making it look easy. Right? It's not because your system is stable. Very few work systems are as stable as we think they are. This is my favorite one. Adding new technology will make the system more efficient. Oh, isn't there an AI app for everything today? Right? All we're going to do is we're going to add in all these AI apps and it's going to be so much better. Well, it might be, but it's also going to fundamentally change the work. And I can tell you the most ironic thing about all of these things like ChatGPT and Crayon and all of these kinds of things is that the first jobs that popped up after ChatGPT were ChatGPT prompt writers, a specialized set of people whose job it was to interact with the AI that was designed not to need specialized skills, right? How do we make the tool do what we want it to do? So the work is going to change in other ways. All of these approaches appreciate these complexities. We'll hit a couple more because I still have time. So I love this other one. Changes only need to be made in isolated cases. 0, 1 above. Right? We're back to the same thing. Our system is far more dynamic. Our system is changing far more often than we think it has, than we think it does. So this idea that we can simply figure out how to do it and force everybody to do it that way doesn't represent the reality of how complexity-informed, emergence-informed organizations really work. All right. So, if this is where we are now, if this is where we have come to as safety and quality specialists, folks who became really the first home of a lot of these HRO ideas. For the record, they didn't get adopted in their original intended locations. They didn't get adopted in the disaster response world or in the business admin world until after they had already been explored by industrial engineering and psychology and safety. So the question becomes, how did we get to a point where the most interesting things happening in HOP, the most interesting things happening in resilience engineering, the most interesting things happening in HRO are not in safety companies? If you asked me to pick out where are the most interesting places, if one of my students came to me and said, I want to work in RE, I want to work in HOP, where's the most interesting place to do that? These are the companies I would point to. These are the organizations. What do these organizations have in common? I mean, they're all large technology organizations, but why do they care about HOP? Right? You have to have a pretty significant computer failure for someone to die. Why do these people care? It's not a rhetorical question. If anybody has any ideas, light up their little stick. Yeah.
Because when these systems go down, they lose a lot of money.
That's true, right? When these go down, they lose a lot of money. There are other characteristics, though. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that really drives this is this idea that these organizations have a very tangible grasp of the idea that no one can really understand their system. And how the heck could you? When you're changing it, I don't know, somewhere between 20 times a second at Amazon and 5-6 times a day at Netflix, how could anyone really understand the system? Etsy, for those of you who aren't familiar, is an online craft marketplace, similar to Amazon, but small independent crafters make things and sell them. And one of my favorite people in the whole world, a guy named John Allspaw, used to be their chief technology officer. And while he was there, he instituted a program called the 3-arm sweater. And it comes from, this is a craft marketplace, but the idea is if you're knitting a sweater and all of a sudden it comes out with 3 arms, you realize you've done something terribly wrong. And so the 3-arm sweater award was awarded to the junior engineer who had the biggest mess up during their first year at work. And they had to explain how it happened, and everybody cheered, and everybody reached up and said, yeah, I've almost done that. Or, I had one of those just like that, except I didn't accidentally lose people's passwords. I lost people's credit card numbers, or all of these kinds of things, right? So these are the organizations we now need to look to emulate. These are organizations that have very little confidence that they understand what's going on in their system, and they build human performance teams to compensate for that, to expect that, to recognize that. After all, if you're running a nuclear power plant, and this happens, there's no choice like this, right? If you're running an Etsy marketplace, an IBM situation, we can roll back. right? We can try, and so it's worth it. The last thing I want to hit you with is this. We talk about HOP as a journey. We talk about Safety II as a journey. It's a journey. It's not a destination. The implication of that is that we should find pleasure in the small accomplishments. So we should recognize that it's not about how far we have to go. In fact, I was joking with Charles this morning, actually joking with his daughter, that we are a bunch of people who gather every year with the righteous indignation that we are going to change the way the world does safety, with very little evidence to support that conclusion. And yet every year we come. It's not exactly true, but it's funny. At least 2 people thought it was funny. The rest of you just have no sense of humor because I'm hilarious. All the people I talk to who I pay to tell me that. So the question becomes, if HOP is a journey, we're supposed to enjoy the ride, where are we going? How will we know when we've gotten there? How will we know if we're even going in the right direction? HOP is a journey. I like it. It's a good sentiment. You can put it on a bumper sticker, right? That must mean it's good. But the question is, what does that mean? Where are we going? Where is the HOP journey taking us? Thoughts? There must be someone with a glow stick who can answer that for me. We're all on this journey. Congratulations, we've got 250 people to sign up to go anywhere we want. There must be someone, yeah. To get better. Okay, it's a journey to get better. How do we know if we're getting better in the right direction? Right, we said we have multiple goals. Oh. You see, the thing is, I'm part of a very special program. I'm, a researcher and academic. Mostly I live in a basement laboratory. But the thing is, if you're a researcher and all of your experiments come out just right and all of your students like you, they let you out on the scientist release program for just 1 day. And we get to come out of our laboratories and interact with real people and see the sun. Charles has to sign this little paper or else they send the sheriff after me at midnight. But I love these kinds of questions because it forces us to really engage with the kinds of things we're struggling. Yeah, where are we going?
I would say it's a successful mission outcome, whatever that may be for your organization, with minimum disruption based on safety violations or unwanted outcomes.
Okay, we're getting better at doing the things we want and doing less of the things we don't want. I would throw this out there for the journey. This is our destination. If someone says, particularly your managers, particularly your supervisors are going to say, all right, we're going to pay all this money for you people to go to a conference. Where are we going? I'm going to get on a boat. Where am I going? Even if I'm going to enjoy the ride, where are we trying to get to? This is where we're trying to get to. We're trying to more fully understand our systems. We have created systems that we rarely truly understand, and a big part of what we do has to be continually working to understand them. This is not a trivial task. Secondly, and this is where the complexity-informed part of this comes together, when we have goals, when we have constraints, we create pressures in the system. This is absolutely necessary. You can't accomplish anything without creating pressures in the system. You can't have goals without creating pressures in the system. The concern is that the pressures we create in the system don't often interact the way we want them to. They're not linear, right? They don't simply create the results. We don't just mitigate the poor outcomes. Understanding how these pressures proliferate through our systems, understanding how the different units, the people, the work teams are responding to all of these different goals, making trade-offs in real time, under time pressure, with limited resources, trying to do more, the push for ever more efficiency to stay competitive. That's the journey we're on. And we'll know we're there when we understand our systems better. That's the destination. The destination is the journey is one of improvement, but it's not necessarily one of safety improvement. Safety improvement will be a secondary benefit of better understanding our systems, of better understanding these pressures. If you're looking at accidents and you're not seeing pressures, you're not looking deep enough. If you're looking at human choices, whether you agree with them or not, and you're not seeing pressures, you are not looking deep enough. If you're looking at performance, if you're looking at successes, and you are not seeing trade-offs being made, you're not looking deep enough. So with that, I think I would simply encourage you to dig deeper into these. And remember, this is until we work out something better. And again, full apologies. Charcuterie, not soup. These are things that can complement each other, but they are separate ideas. And when you are looking for someone, make sure that the person you bring in, the idea set, the book you pick up, the logic that you start to employ is what you're really looking for, is targeted the way you'd like it to be, is likely to be successful. And with that, I think I'll take some questions.
Use the force, use your lights. What questions? World's smartest man, he'll answer the question, just ask it.
Second smartest, actually.
Third, but anyway. Here we go, thank you. Go ahead.
So when choosing a consultant, which type do I choose for which kind of problem, right? How do I decide if I want an HRO or a HOP or an HPI type of person to come help me?
I think that's a wonderful question. That's ultimately the point of this, is to stimulate that kind of conversation, not just with consultants, but with ideas and books and hiring, full-time hiring, and these kinds of things. The question really depends on the kinds of problems you're trying to solve, right? So one of my concerns about the movement that we are all a part of and that I love so much is that we have found ourselves in a situation where we feel obligated to have a tool for every situation, right? Oh, you got this problem? Oh yeah, I can solve that. Oh, you got this? I can solve that. You have an inefficiency in manufacturing? Yeah, we can solve that too. We're going to do a learning team and figure out. That's not what this is. First, try to understand the problem you're trying to solve, and then let's look for the tool set, the logic set, the kind of reasoning that is most likely to help us solve that kind of problem. If you're having problems with system failure and cascades and things like that, that's probably a resilience engineering problem, right? If you're having problems maintaining a steady tempo of operations, of day-to-day operations, that's an HRO problem. Other questions? Hey.
I got a loud voice, so maybe I'll just. Oh my God! What the hell is this thing? Is this a talk?
I'm there for you, Brian.
Do I talk?
I'm right here.
Brother, do I talk into this? Is this how this works? I'm not comfortable with this. I thought this is a psychologically safe environment. What? Do I talk into the cube? Hey, okay, buddy. So here's the deal. I love the problem definition thing. Like, get in a room together and let's just make sure that we understand what the problem is, and then apply whatever the tool is. But you can even take that sort of, put the tool over here and put the learning first. Like, as a facilitator, I've facilitated a bunch of different learning sessions, whether those are RCAs or FMEAs or informal things like that. And when I take whatever tool, it's I've got to fit this into a spreadsheet, or I got to fit this into my cause and effect diagram, or I got to do, when I put the tool in front, it's almost like, I put the learning on the back burner because I feel like I'm so beholden to my tool, and I got to do that exactly right. And so if I put the learning on the front burner and then figure out, well, what am I going to do? What do I need now to facilitate and maintain this learning? Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a concern. That's a concern, sort of almost in any field. But it becomes to a hammer or to a nail, everything looks, or a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This kind of situation, right? I'm a hop practitioner, so everything looks like a hop problem. I used to teach classes in Lean and Six Sigma and these kinds of things, and one of my biggest critiques, although I do see value in some parts of the Lean and the Six Sigma program, one of my concerns is that, that it had become the tool for every problem, that anything from safety to quality to human resources to legal to HR to shoelace tying, we have this Six Sigma thing, and we're going to throw it at it, and gosh darn it, we're going to shoehorn it in there until it works. So I think that's a concern, and I think one of the ways you mitigate that is by recognizing, hey, there's a whole suite of ideas. There's a whole charcuterie board of different things we can sample from. And if this one isn't working, maybe it's because it's not for this. Maybe it's not that I'm not doing it right or trying hard enough. Maybe this isn't for this. Maybe I need to think about something else.
One more follow-up on that. You might need to be a MacGyver and like mishmash them together like the mustard with the pickle.
I wouldn't go that far, but I think you're absolutely right. Quite frankly, I don't think anyone should eat mustards with pickles, but that's beside the point. Really, I agree, right? So these are basic ideas, right? These are foundational things designed to be largely applicable. What it looks like in any particular organization, in any particular instance, is going to look different, right? What HOP or Safety 2 looks like at Luminant is going to look very different than Lewis Tree, is going to look very different than Caterpillar, and the idea behind this, the recognition behind this is that one of the benefits of combining various elements of complexity-informed members of this family tree is that you can mix and match to some extent, as long as you're maintaining some kind of internal logical consistency. And again, that comes back to the shoehorning, right? If it feels like it doesn't fit, probably step back and take another look.
All right, Asher, we got one more. We're looking for a very succinct answer.
Do you believe that there's a correlation between reliability and safety?
Reliability in terms of, so you're within your, let me step back. So I would define reliability as performance expectation within a specific performance envelope, an expected performance envelope. If we can stay within that performance envelope, are we likely to have higher or better safety outcomes? Yes. That being said, staying within that safety envelope, particularly in competitive and dynamic environments, is a non-trivial task. Figuring out where that safety boundary is, or that performance envelope boundary is, figuring out where that is and making sure you're always 2 feet to the left of it is a non-trivial task. So if we can stay to the left of it, yes, I think we're going to have better safety outcomes. But knowing where that line is a deeply effortful.
Okay, thank you.